Hi, y'all. I think my last video was in April, and it's now December. This video is not going to be very long because I'm in the middle of completely and totally reorganizing everything in my craft space, as well as my kitchen and other areas of my house. Um, the last video that I did was a lockdown journal that I did in a collaboration with a friend of mine. What I'm going to share with you now is some ways you can kind of make your own stuff. Um, we all sometimes get disorganized, or we need something and we don't have it, or we want it and whatever. But before I do that, I got lucky this week. I have a son who collects action figures, and he got a Christmas present early. And he ordered it from the Disney store. Well, when his box came in and he opened it, the first thing I noticed was this. And I thought, ooh, that's pretty. If you're like me and you have a love for paper and paper crafting, then this is lovely stuff. So I asked him if I could have it. And I guess at first he thought maybe I wanted the action figure, and he told me no. And I was like, no, I want the paper, not your figure. So I got this. And what I love about it is that it is actually, I hope you can see this, yeah, it's actually tissue paper. So it's a nice decorative tissue paper. Well, shoot, I don't want to fold back up, y'all. Okay, we need that thing that was under that. Yep, we need that thing. Okay. The other thing I want to share with y'all is something that I discovered probably a couple of months ago. But I had never used it for my own personal use. And that is this stuff right here. Loctite Gel Control Super Glue. My husband needed to repair a video game controller for one of our sons, and it seems like a plastic piece inside the controller had broke or whatever. And at the time, we didn't have an extra $60 to throw at a new controller. It would just be easier to fix the one that just needed a piece, more or less, glued back in place. So we got this stuff. And then about 3 days ago, maybe 4, my favorite pair of non-fabric cutting scissors broke. I really couldn't or shouldn't complain that the handle of them broke, because I've had them for 9 years or more. It's possible I've had these for like 10 or 11 years. They began as my fabric cutting scissors, and they started over time dulling, and then they got downgraded to other things like cardstock and paper and whatnot. I have used them to cut dead stems off plants. You name it, I've probably tried to cut it with them. I don't even remember what brand these scissors are. I know if I own it, chances are it's not very expensive, because I don't spend a lot of money on, things like scissors and stuff. Well, I didn't want to give up my scissors because the blade's still decent. So this is what that handle looks like now. What I did was I glued the brake with this, and I held it tight until it set. And then I didn't like the feel of the glue, and it just felt weird. So, went to my, I guess you'd call it junk drawer in my kitchen. It's where we keep things like electrical tape, duct tape, odds and ends kind of stuff. And I had this stuff. Ooh, we got a nice shine because for some reason my light is on and I'm not sure why. Well, anyways, this is a UL listed tape. It is not intended for crafting. I do know that if you live in a manufactured house in a hurricane prone area and you have a somewhat faulty back door at times and you're facing a major hurricane, you can take this stuff right here and tape your faulty door shut from the outside. I did that because before we bought our home, it had been broken into by someone, and so there's some minor issues. We've mostly got it fixed, but when we went to evacuate our home, we were looking at a Cat 3 hurricane. And I didn't know if maybe the door would leak. I was pretty sure the door wouldn't come open, but I was afraid it might leak. So I taped it shut with that tape. And lo and behold, that hurricane was not a Category 3. Its name was Michael. And it was a Cat 5. It wrecked Northwest Florida. When I got back home, the only way to get into my backyard, due to the amount of downed trees, was to go through the house and out the back door, which is the door I had taped shut. I assumed that tape was like duct tape. Y'all, it's not. It held in a Cat 5 hurricane. I could not budge that door. Kick it, push it, it didn't matter. I couldn't budge it. So I ended up having to climb a broken fence, go into the backyard, remove the tape, and then I could open my door again. So it is some very, very, very good strong tape. And I'm sure that should the super glue want to come undone, which we've had no problems with anything else we've used it on, that tape will work to keep my trusty old nasty scissors working. They look bad, but it's because they're so old. Now, for the other part of this video, I often like to play with paint. And one thing I enjoy doing is using things like a plastic knife, a plastic spoon, something like that to spray paint with. And I used a napkin to wipe that paint off with. I had a magnet that I could attach this to something metal and, near where I was working at, and I would just wipe it off. Like, this is the side I did my wiping on. To do this, and now I have my own tissue paper. I mean, it could stand some more paint, I guess, or whatever, or stamps or whatever, but I'm done with this. It's just going to get used up like it is because I've already switched to another one. This particular napkin came in some MREs that we got following Hurricane Michael. And I kept all those spoons and forks and knives that were, left over in MREs that we didn't want to eat or whatever. Because you never know when you'll need a plastic spoon, knife, or fork. And they had napkins and handy wipes and all sorts of stuff with them. So, kept that. And I opened one time to get a spoon, I think. And this napkin was in there. So, you're going to want a very thin napkin. I don't know if your average paper towels would work or not. But this will give you decorative tissue paper. Another thing you can use if you don't have that is coffee filter. This one has some, see, shimmery, shiny paint on it. You can use a coffee filter to make your own tissue paper. Another thing you can do with a coffee filter, and this is the other thing we're going to talk about, is use it to make, let me see if I can find a white spot. Use it to make tracing paper. You know, you can trace on that. But I recently discovered something maybe a little better. You don't want to buy tracing paper, or in my case, I couldn't find any. I needed some. Someone recommended parchment paper. Now, I would, to use it as tracing paper, I would not recommend the name brand like Reynolds that has the name printed on it, because that's going to mess your stuff up. But if you go to Dollar Tree, you can pick up parchment paper for $1 a roll, and there's no printing on it. So last night, I made some cinnamon rolls, and this is a remnant that I cut off. And you can trace on this. I would attempt to trace for you, but it's hard to do that and hold the camera. So, to test the theory, I used a ballpoint ink pen, you know, like a regular bit. And I put this over some image in a magazine. And I just traced the image real quick. And the first thing I noticed, and this is still the case, it does not wipe off. So, use parchment paper, especially if you already have it in your kitchen. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk to y'all about real quick is how I've been organizing things that I tend to misplace because they're small. But in this particular case, they're small and tall. That is my ballpoint ink pens and my permanent markers. What these containers are is Crystal Light containers. You know, if you buy Crystal Light to make by like a half gallon, I think that's what they are. These things are perfect. They have a lid, all sorts of stuff. And ta-da, works wonders. The last thing I want to mention is, and I've only got about 3 minutes to do this, is what has kept me off of YouTube. Right after my last video, I was called to come to the rescue of a 3-week-old kitten that was thrown out of the window of a car and landed in a ditch at my mother-in-law's house. So I went and picked the cat up. He was a handful. He was fairly wild, scared of people. He had been traumatized. It took me a while to get it to where he wasn't always crammed up my shadow. I'm sure at some point y'all will meet him. He is now a big, fat, fluffy, furry gray feller named Spazzer. He got his name because when we first got him, he was just so spazzy. He was hyper, he was running, he was jumping, he was just a handful. He's thankfully calmed down a lot now. But I'm sure one day y'all will meet my fur baby, which has taken up the better part of my time. And this video is having to come to an end. So until next time, which might not be too long from now, happy crafting. Bye-bye.